6 technical fouls, a $1,000 fine, and a performance so rare that only 4 other players in professional basketball history had ever matched it. Caitlin Clark had every reason in the world to be furious. Instead, she did something that left the entire basketball world speechless. Friday night in Indianapolis felt different. It was one of those nights where you put your phone down, stop talking, and just watch. Because what Caitlin Clark did on that court doesn't happen. Not to rookies, not to veterans, not to almost anyone in the history of the game. By the time the final buzzer sounded, people were still trying to process it. 45 points, 10 assists, steals, and blocks stacked on top of it all. A stat line so rare that history only lists 4 other names next to it, and she reached it in under 30 minutes. Still playing under a minute's restriction her own coaching staff hadn't lifted. Analysts scrambled for comparisons. Michael Jordan's name came up. So did Luka Dončić's. Social media simply didn't have the words. For one night, Caitlin Clark's entire world was basketball, what she did on the floor, what it meant for the record books, and what it signaled about where her career was headed. Then came Saturday, and the entire conversation flipped in 90 seconds. 90 seconds into Indiana's game against the New York Liberty, Clark ran into a hard screen from Jonquil Jones. She hit the floor, looked for the whistle, and got nothing. She stood up, said something to the nearest official, and was hit with a technical foul before the game had barely started. Her 6th of the season, another $1,000 gone, and suddenly, the same player who had just joined one of the most exclusive stat clubs in basketball history was standing 2 technical fouls away from an automatic suspension. Think about that for a second. The highlight reels from Friday night were still circulating. Her name was still trending for one of the greatest individual performances of the year. And less than 24 hours later, the league's most watched athlete was back in the headlines, but for the opposite reason. How does a sport go from celebrating history on Friday to disciplining the same player on Saturday? That question didn't land quietly. It hit hard. Indiana still won the game, beating a Liberty team that had gotten the better of them earlier this season, 108-88, with Kelsey Mitchell dropping 33 points. For a team fighting at 15-10 in a brutal competitive conference, that's a genuinely strong road win with real playoff weight behind it. But nobody was talking about the win. They were talking about the technical, the fine, the math. 6 down, 2 to go before a mandatory suspension. One night, fans were celebrating one of the best individual performances women's basketball had ever seen. The next night, they were counting fouls like a countdown clock. That whiplash wasn't random. For anyone who's actually been paying attention this season, it wasn't bad luck or bad timing either. It was the latest chapter in something that's been building for months. To understand why Saturday hit the way it did, you have to rewind all the way back to June to a game against the Phoenix Mercury. Clark picked up a technical that a lot of fans and analysts immediately called questionable at best. The kind of borderline call that usually just gets absorbed into the flow of a physical game and forgotten. But this one didn't disappear. The league reviewed it and upheld it. Even though similar calls on other players earlier in the season had been reversed, and that's the part that mattered. Not that one technical foul is some massive deal on its own, but what it revealed about how Clark was being treated compared to everyone else on the floor. That single decision lit the fuse. Fans noticed immediately. Screenshots started circulating within hours. Side-by-side comparisons flooded timelines. Players doing the exact same thing, sometimes worse, without facing anywhere near the same scrutiny or consequences. If the same behavior gets rescinded for one player and upheld for another in the same season, people are going to ask why. And that question hung over every single technical foul that followed. By the time the 6th one came around in July, fans weren't reacting to one bad call anymore. They were reacting to a pattern they've been documenting since spring. Screenshot by screenshot, box score by box score. That June call cost the league more than just one contested ruling. It cost them the benefit of the doubt from a fan base that was already watching closely and now started watching with a magnifying glass. And this isn't just internet noise. Indiana's head coach Stephanie White isn't running a fan account. She's a professional who has to be careful about how she talks about officiating without creating more friction with the league office. And even she has said on the record that there needs to be a smarter conversation about how technical fouls are being applied to her own player. Sit with that for a second. A head coach publicly acknowledging that this is something the organization has to actively manage, not something they're hoping quietly goes away. National media picked up on it, too. Some outlets even calling it a tug-of-war narrative. One week, Clark's the league's biggest draw. The next week, she's apparently the most heavily policed player on the floor. Once that framing leaves WNBA-specific coverage and spreads into mainstream sports conversation, the league loses control of the story, takes on a life of its own. Look at where Clark sits in the league's technical foul rankings, and the picture gets even harder to explain away. She's currently tied for second in the entire league behind only Wilson. 3 completely different types of players. Wilson's a dominant force in the paint who draws physical, aggressive contact. The other names near the top play, with constant, relentless intensity attacking the basket. Clark is a perimeter playmaker. Her game is built on passing, shooting, and creating space, not the kind of high-contact, emotionally charged play that usually racks up technical fouls. So, why are 3 completely different styles of player landing in the exact same disciplinary bracket? That's a tough coincidence to explain. And when questions like that don't get answered, fans fill in the blanks themselves and usually not in the league's favor. In response, something remarkable happened. With zero official structure behind it, fans built their own tracking system. Real-time commentary, box scores getting refreshed mid-aim just to check if a new technical had been added. Threads comparing every disputed call to similar situations involving other players. This isn't casual complaining anymore. This fan base has essentially built its own fact-checking operation, organized, persistent, and not willing to let a single questionable call slide by unnoticed. When that many people are documenting every decision a league makes, that becomes its own form of pressure, campaign, or no campaign. And there's a financial layer to this, too, that doesn't get talked about enough. Before this season even started, the WNBA quietly overhauled its fine structure. Technical fouls 4 through 7 now carry a $1,000 penalty, up sharply from just $200 in previous seasons. Applied evenly across the league on paper, sure, but in practice, it hits very differently depending on who's racking up the fouls. For a player creeping closer to the threshold than almost anyone else in the league, the cost of frustration just got a lot steeper a lot faster. A pro athlete can obviously afford $1,000. That's not the point. The point is what the structure says about priorities. When the cost of frustration goes up, but the calls causing that frustration stay exactly the same, the entire burden shifts onto the player. Here's the thing, though. Clark hasn't turned this into a personal grievance. She's been deliberate about steering the conversation away from individual calls and toward a structural fix. Her actual ask, repeated publicly throughout the season, is full-time officiating instead of the league's current part-time setup. That's a meaningful distinction. She's not asking for special treatment or for calls to be overturned in her favor. She's arguing that fixing officiating consistency helps everyone on the floor, not just her. That framing carries a lot more weight than simple frustration would. It shifts the entire narrative from Clark thinks she's getting too many technicals to the officiating system needs fixing. Those are 2 very different arguments, and it's a lot harder for a league office to dismiss the second one without looking like it's avoiding a fixable problem altogether. So what actually happens if an 8th technical shows up? Strip away the drama and the mechanics are simple. One more technical after the 8th triggers an automatic 1-aim suspension. No hearing, no appeal, just a forced night on the bench. For most players on most teams in most seasons, that's a minor inconvenience. For Indiana right now at 15-10 in a brutal playoff race, it would be a genuine problem. Clark is averaging close to 21 points, nearly 8 assists, and 4 rebounds a night. She's not just Indiana's best player, she's the engine of their entire offense. The one player whose shooting range and passing completely reshapes what a defense has to do. Take her out for a night. And Indiana isn't just down a scorer. They're running an entirely different offense with 48 hours notice in the middle of a playoff push without months of practice built around it. And it's not just about wins and losses either. This season, Clark has delivered exactly what the league has been chasing for years: record viewership, sold-out arenas, and a level of mainstream attention women's basketball has historically struggled to sustain. Broadcasters point to her as a guaranteed ratings driver. The league itself has publicly credited her with accelerating growth beyond anything a marketing campaign could produce. A suspension doesn't just cost Indiana a game. It costs the league one of its most reliable draws, right when casual fans are paying attention like never before. So, here's where this actually leaves us. Every single technical foul now gets treated like its own mini-drama. Fans refreshing box scores in real time. Every interaction with an official getting dissected. That kind of constant scrutiny wears on everyone involved, including Clark herself. She's a competitor. She plays with fire because that's what it takes at the highest level. But very few athletes in any sport have had to manage that intensity publicly while a suspension clock ticks in the background at the same time. None of this excuse is legitimate technical fouls. Nobody's arguing that. But the margin for error has shrunk to almost nothing at the exact moment she's playing the best basketball of her career. A week that started with a historic 45-10 assist masterpiece somehow turned into a countdown toward a suspension. That contradiction alone tells you this story is bigger than any single moment inside it. So it all comes down to one real question. Is the WNBA actually going to address this properly with a real structural response? Not a quiet memo update buried somewhere in the league's internal paperwork, not a footnote in next season's rulebook that nobody notices until it's already too late. A real answer out loud on the record to the exact thing Clark has been saying all season. Because right now the approach has been silence and fines, nothing more. And here's the problem with that. If silence and fines keep happening often enough, they stop looking like isolated incidents. They start looking like a policy, a quiet, unofficial one, but a policy all the same. And once fans start seeing it that way, and a lot of them already do, it's almost impossible to walk that perception back with just a press release. The countdown right now sits at 2. 2 more technical fouls. That's all it takes. 2 more whistles, and this stops being a hypothetical debate on social media and becomes an actual real in-court reality. The most watched player in the entire league sidelined, benched, forced to sit and watch during the most important stretch of Indiana's season. Right in the middle of a playoff race that every single game matters for. And however it plays out, whether the 8th technical comes tomorrow, next week, or never happens at all, the league is going to have to answer for how it got here. There's no version of this where the silence just quietly fades away on its own. Not anymore. Not with this much attention on every single call. So, here's the real question for you watching this right now. Do you think the WNBA owes Caitlin Clark a genuine structural response to everything that's happened since June? Or do you think this is just part of the game, the normal cost of being the most scrutinized player on the floor? Drop your take in the comments below. I want to know where you actually stand on this because the comments on this exact topic have been split right down the middle. And if you found this breakdown interesting, do me a favor and hit subscribe because this story is far from over. There are 2 whistles left before this whole thing boils over. And when it does, you're going to want to already be here for it.